Catholic priest exposes Hichilema, peace calls are hypocritical, Zambia political crisis. Is President Hichilema truly calling for peace, or just performing for the cameras? A Catholic priest has publicly challenged the president, calling his calls for peace hypocritical. Tonight, we unpack what this means for Zambia's political climate, religious influence in politics, and whether these words will resonate with citizens or further inflame tensions. Stay tuned. This is more than just criticism. It's a moral challenge to the highest office in the land. Good day, viewers. Welcome to another edition of InspirAfrica Official. I'm Nakash. It's been quite a week here, hasn't it? The rains have been unpredictable, much like the political climate we're about to discuss today. And speaking of unpredictable, we have a story that's sending shockwaves through Zambia's corridors of power. Imagine this. A man of the cloth, sworn to spiritual guidance and moral authority, standing before his congregation with words that cut deeper than any political speech. The sanctuary falls silent. The air grows thick with tension. And then, he speaks truths that the government doesn't want you to hear. What happens when a Catholic priest, a figure traditionally above the political fray, breaks his silence to condemn the very president who preaches national unity? What drives a religious leader to risk everything and call out hypocrisy at the highest levels of government? Picture President Hakainde Hichilema, standing before cameras, hands clasped in practiced sincerity, his voice smooth as silk, calling for peace, for unity, for Zambians to come together. Beautiful words. Inspiring rhetoric. But what if those words were nothing more than a mask? A carefully crafted deception hiding a far darker reality? When does a call for peace become a weapon of oppression? When does unity become a euphemism for silence? And when a priest, bound by faith, guided by conscience, decides he can no longer remain silent in the face of what he sees as profound injustice, what does that tell us about the state of our nation? Who is being silenced? What are they hiding? And most importantly, what happens next? Factual foundation, background and timeline. The revelation came to light during a Sunday Mass at a Catholic parish in Lusaka, when Father Paul Samasumo delivered what can only be described as a political earthquake disguised as a homily. Father Samasumo, a well-respected clergyman who has served the Zambian Catholic community for over 2 decades, had largely stayed out of direct political commentary throughout his ministry. But something changed. Something pushed him past the breaking point. The context here is crucial. Over the past 18 months, President Hichilema's administration has faced mounting criticism over what opposition leaders and civil society organizations have characterized as increasing authoritarianism. There have been arrests of opposition figures, restrictions on public gatherings, and what many perceive as selective application of the law. It began quietly. In early 2024, several prominent opposition members were detained on what their supporters claim were trumped-up charges. By mid-year, radio stations critical of the government found themselves facing sudden regulatory investigations. Community activists reported intimidation. Journalists whispered about pressure from above. Then came the president's speeches. One after another, Hichilema appeared at public events, his message consistent: we must have peace. We must have unity. We must come together as Zambians. Beautiful sentiments. Who could argue with peace? But Father Samasumo could. And on that Sunday morning in late November 2024, he did. The priest had watched the pattern unfold. He'd counseled parishioners who'd lost family members to politically motivated violence. He'd heard confessions from government workers pressured to support the ruling party. He'd seen the gap between the president's words and the reality on the ground grow into a chasm. On November 24, 2024, Father Samasumo ascended to the pulpit. His congregation expected the usual homily, perhaps something about faith, charity, the upcoming Advent season. What they got instead was a blistering critique that would dominate Zambian social media for weeks and send government spokespersons scrambling for damage control. Direct evidence, quotes and testimony. Let me read to you Father Samasumo's exact words from that morning. These are his own words, recorded by multiple parishioners who were present. My dear brothers and sisters in Christ, I stand before you today with a heavy heart. You know, we are constantly told that we must have peace. Peace, peace, peace. It's become almost like a mantra, hasn't it? The president says, let us have peace. Government ministers say, we need peace. And who can argue with that? What kind of person would say, no, we don't want peace? But I must ask you, and I must ask myself, what kind of peace are we talking about? Is it the peace of justice? Or is it the peace of silence? Is it the peace that comes when wrongs are made right? Or is it the peace that comes when victims are told to be quiet? Father Samasumo's voice, according to witnesses, grew stronger here. When a president calls for peace while his government arrests opposition leaders on questionable charges, what kind of peace is that? When he speaks of unity while communities are divided by fear and intimidation, what kind of unity is that? I'm sorry, but I must say it plainly, these calls for peace are hypocritical. HYPOCRITICAL, hypocritical. The congregation reportedly gasped. One parishioner, Maria Firai, later told journalists, We couldn't believe what we were hearing. Father Paul has never spoken like this before. You could see in his face, in his whole body, that this was something he felt he had to say. Some people looked shocked. Others were nodding. My hands were shaking. Father Samasumo continued. You see, Christ himself spoke about this. He said, blessed are the peacemakers. Not blessed are those who demand silence and call it peace. Not blessed are those who oppress and then ask for calm. Real peace, biblical peace, godly peace, it requires justice. It requires truth. It requires that we address the root causes of conflict, not just suppress the symptoms. So when I hear President Hichilema, and I say his name, yes, I say his name, when I hear President Hichilema calling for peace while his administration does things that create the very conditions for unrest, I cannot remain silent. My conscience, guided by my faith, will not allow it. The priest then addressed critics directly, as if anticipating the backlash. Now, some will say, Father, you should stay out of politics. This is not your place. But let me tell you something, when politics affects the lives of my parishioners, when it affects their freedom, their dignity, their ability to speak truth without fear, then it becomes a moral issue. And moral issues are absolutely my concern. They are the church's concern. They are God's concern. Another parishioner, Joseph Banda, described the atmosphere. By the time Father Paul finished, you could hear a pin drop. Then slowly, some started clapping. Not everyone, but many. Others were crying. I saw old women with tears streaming down their faces. This wasn't just a sermon. This was someone finally saying what so many of us have been thinking but were too afraid to say. Father Samasumo concluded his remarks with this. I pray for President Hichilema. I truly do. I pray that he will examine his conscience. I pray that he will remember why he sought this office, to serve the people, not to silence them. I pray for true peace in Zambia. But that peace will only come with justice, with accountability, and with an end to this performance of unity while practicing division. Deeper analysis, implications and reactions. The government's response was swift and telling. Within hours, the Ministry of Information issued a statement expressing disappointment that a religious leader would engage in partisan politics. They emphasized the administration's commitment to peace and development, noting that constructive criticism is welcome, but irresponsible statements that could incite division are not helpful. Notice what they didn't do. They didn't address any of Father Samasumo's specific allegations. They didn't explain the arrests of opposition figures. They didn't defend their record. Instead, they attacked the messenger and wrapped themselves in the flag of peace and development. Political analyst Dr. Chanda Mwansa offered this perspective. What we're seeing is a classic authoritarian playbook. Call for peace while creating the conditions for conflict. Demand unity while dividing the nation along political lines. And when someone with moral authority, like a Catholic priest, calls out this contradiction, accuse them of being divisive. It's Orwellian, really. The opposition United Party for National Development, ironically, the party Hichilema himself once led, praised Father Samasumo's courage. Their spokesperson, Mutal Kailna, stated, "Father Samasumo has said what many Zambians are thinking. We have a government that speaks of peace but practices persecution. The priest's words are not divisive. They're diagnostic. He's identifying the disease so we can seek the cure. But support for the priest isn't universal, even within religious circles." Some Catholic officials privately expressed concern that Father Samasumo's comments could politicize the church and invite government retaliation. One bishop, speaking on condition of anonymity, told reporters, "We understand Father Paul's frustration, but we must be careful. The church has always been a voice for the voiceless, yes, but we must also be wise as serpents and innocent as doves." Direct confrontation with political power can sometimes do more harm than good. This raises profound questions about the role of religious institutions in times of political crisis. Should priests and pastors remain above politics, or do they have a moral obligation to speak truth to power? Where is the line between pastoral care and political activism? And what happens to a society when even its spiritual leaders feel compelled to enter the political arena? Legal experts have also weighed in on potential ramifications. Constitutional lawyer Bwalia Chibasakunda noted, "The Constitution guarantees freedom of speech and freedom of religion. Father Samasumo has every right to express his views. However, we've seen this government use laws against defamation of the president and incitement rather creatively. I wouldn't be surprised if there's some attempt to intimidate or silence him." Indeed, within a week of the sermon, Father Samasumo reported receiving threatening phone calls. His parish received a visit from police officers who claimed they were investigating complaints about the sermon disturbing the peace, a charge the priest's supporters dismiss as harassment. On social media, Zambians are divided. Hashtags like #StandWithFatherPaul and #RespectThePresident trended simultaneously. Some young Zambians created memes celebrating the priest's boldness. Others accused him of being an opposition stooge. But perhaps the most significant aspect of this controversy is what it reveals about Zambia's political trajectory. When a nation reaches the point where religious leaders feel compelled to make such stark statements, when the gap between a government's rhetoric and its actions becomes so glaring that even priests can't remain silent, that's a warning sign. The historical parallels are uncomfortable. In many countries that have slid toward authoritarianism, religious institutions often serve as early warning systems. When churches start speaking out, it's often because other avenues for accountability have been closed.